Jasper Vance pushed through the rusted door of Hangar 47, his toolbox clanging against the metal frame. The sound echoed through the cavernous space like a lonely bell. Dust particles danced in the pale morning light that filtered through cracked windows high above. This wasn't supposed to be part of his rounds, but the facility manager had mentioned strange sounds coming from the abandoned building. As the head maintenance engineer at Riverside Aeronautics, Jasper had seen plenty of forgotten corners and neglected machinery. But something about this place felt different. The air itself seemed to hum with an energy he couldn't identify. His boots crunched on debris as he made his way deeper into the shadows. An impossible sight, what he found defied every rational thought in his mind. There, sprawled across the concrete floor like a fallen cathedral window, lay a dragon. Her scales shimmered with an iridescent blue-green that reminded him of deep ocean water. But it was her wings that made his breath catch in his throat. They were magnificent even in their damaged state, stretched wide, but clearly unable to fold properly. Jasper stood frozen, his mind struggling to process what his eyes were telling him. Dragons weren't real. They belonged in fairy tales and fantasy novels, not in maintenance hangars at small-town airports. Yet here she was, breathing slowly, her great rib-cage rising and falling with each labored breath. Her eyes opened as he approached, golden orbs that held intelligence far beyond any animal he'd ever encountered. There was pain there, too, and something else that made his chest tighten. Resignation, as if she had given up hope long ago. The assessment drawing on 20 years of fixing broken things, Jasper forced himself to think practically. Whatever this creature was, she was clearly hurt and needed help. He set down his toolbox and slowly circled her prone form, keeping his movements deliberate and non-threatening. The damage was extensive, but not hopeless. Her left wing bore tears along the membrane, old wounds that had healed poorly. The right wing was twisted at an unnatural angle, suggesting broken bones that had set incorrectly. Worst of all, a thick layer of some crystalline substance had formed along her wing joints, effectively locking them in place. "Well, beautiful," he said softly, his voice barely above a whisper. "Looks like someone did a number on you." The dragon's head turned slightly toward him, those golden eyes studying his face with careful attention. She made no aggressive moves, no attempts to threaten or drive him away. If anything, she seemed curious about this small human who spoke to her with such gentleness. First Contact Jasper had always believed that broken things wanted to be fixed. Whether it was a seized engine or a damaged landing gear, every machine seemed to sigh with relief when he restored its function. Looking at this magnificent creature, he felt that same calling, that same irresistible urge to heal what had been damaged. He reached into his toolbox and pulled out a small LED light. Moving slowly, he approached her left wing, keeping his voice low and steady. "I'm just going to take a look, okay? I won't hurt you." The membrane was thin enough that the light showed the intricate network of bones and blood vessels beneath. It was like looking at the blueprint of flight itself, a masterwork of engineering that put human aircraft to shame. But the tears were deep, and infection had set in along the edges of several wounds. As he examined the crystalline formations around her joints, he realized they weren't natural. Someone or something had deliberately done this to her, trapping her in a prison of her own body. The thought filled him with a cold anger that surprised him with its intensity. An unspoken promise. "I don't know how you got here," he said, settling back on his heels, "or who did this to you. But I know about fixing broken wings. It's what I do." The dragon's eyes never left his face as he spoke. Slowly, carefully, she lifted her great head and moved it closer to him. For a moment, Jasper thought she might be testing his scent, but then he felt the gentlest possible touch as she pressed her forehead against his chest. The gesture was so unexpectedly tender that he felt tears prick at the corners of his eyes. In that moment, something passed between them. Not words, but understanding. She was asking for help, and he was promising to give it. He placed his calloused hand on the smooth scales of her snout, feeling the warmth of living flesh beneath. "We'll figure this out together," he whispered. "I promise you'll fly again." Outside the hangar, storm clouds were gathering on the horizon. But inside, in the dusty half-light of the forgotten building, hope was taking root for the first time in years. Neither the damaged dragon nor the determined engineer knew exactly what lay ahead, but they both understood that this was the beginning of something extraordinary. As Jasper began cataloging what supplies he would need, the dragon closed her eyes and allowed herself to believe, just for a moment, that the long nightmare of her captivity might finally be coming to an end. 3 days had passed since Jasper first discovered Seraphina in the abandoned hangar. He had given her that name on the second day, when her gentle humming reminded him of ancient hymns his grandmother used to sing. She seemed to approve of it. Tilting her great head in what he had learned was her way of showing agreement. Jasper had been careful to keep his visit secret. He arrived before dawn and left after his official shift ended, telling his coworkers he was working on a personal project. It wasn't entirely a lie. This had become the most personal project of his life. The hangar had transformed into a makeshift medical facility. Jasper had smuggled in supplies, piece by piece. Industrial solvents to dissolve the crystalline bonds, specialized tools for delicate work, healing ointments designed for aircraft fabric that he hoped would work on dragon membrane. He had even installed a small space heater to keep the area warm, knowing that Seraphine's injuries made it difficult for her to regulate her body temperature. The delicate process. "Easy now," Jasper murmured as he worked on dissolving another section of the crystalline prison around her shoulder joint. The substance was incredibly tough, like fossilized resin mixed with metal shavings. Each piece had to be carefully heated and chemically softened before it could be removed without damaging the delicate wing structure beneath. Seraphina had learned to trust his touch completely. She would stretch out the wing he was working on and hold perfectly still, even when the process clearly caused her discomfort. Her golden eyes would fix on his face, drawing strength from his calm concentration. "You're being so brave," he told her, as a particularly stubborn chunk finally gave way. Underneath, her natural scales gleamed like precious stones, unmarked by the corruption that had held her captive. She responded with a soft rumble deep in her chest, a sound that somehow conveyed both gratitude and encouragement. It was becoming clear to Jasper that dragons were far more intelligent than any human had ever imagined. Seraphina understood not just his words, but his intentions, his moods, even his worries. Growing connection as the days passed, their bond deepened beyond mere patient and healer. During breaks in the restoration work, Jasper would sit beside her massive head and tell her about his life. About his failed marriage, his love for fixing things, his dreams of flying that had never quite materialized despite working around aircraft for decades. Seraphina would listen with the attention of someone who truly cared. Sometimes she would rest her chin on his shoulder, sharing her warmth on the chilly mornings. Other times she would make soft sounds that seemed like responses to his stories, as if she was sharing her own experiences in a language he was slowly learning to understand. One evening, as Jasper worked by lamplight to repair a tear in her wing membrane, he felt her watching him with unusual intensity. When he looked up, she lowered her head until they were eye to eye, just inches apart. "What is it, beautiful?" he asked softly. She breathed out slowly, and in that breath was a sound like wind through cathedral spires. But more than that, images flashed in Jasper's mind. He saw vast skies and mountain peaks, felt the joy of soaring on thermal currents, experienced the freedom that only flight could bring. For just a moment, he understood what she had lost and why his work meant everything to her. Obstacles and doubts, the restoration wasn't without setbacks. Some of the crystalline formations had grown so deep into her joints that removing them required surgical precision. Jasper's hands, steady though they were, sometimes trembled with the weight of responsibility. One wrong move could permanently damage her ability to fly. There were nights when he lay awake in his small apartment, wondering if he was fooling himself. What did a simple aircraft mechanic know about healing dragons? What if his amateur efforts were causing more harm than good? But each morning, when he saw the trust in Seraphine's eyes and felt her gentle greeting touch against his hand, his doubts melted away. She believed in him completely, and that faith gave him strength to continue. The breakthrough came during the 3rd week. Jasper had been working on the main joint of her right wing, the one that had been twisted and locked in place. As the last piece of crystalline prison dissolved away, he felt the joint suddenly give a tiny movement. "Did you feel that?" he asked excitedly. Seraphine's eyes widened with wonder. Slowly, carefully, she tried to flex the wing. For the first time in who knew how many years, it responded to her will. The movement was small, barely noticeable to anyone else, but to both of them, it was a miracle. A moment of magic that night. As Jasper packed up his tools, Seraphina did something she had never done before. She began to sing. It wasn't like any earthly music. Her voice rose and fell in harmonies that seemed to come from the very foundation of the world. The sound filled the hangar with warmth and light that had nothing to do with his electric heater or work lamps. It was the song of ancient skies and forgotten freedoms, of hope reborn and dreams restored. Jasper stood transfixed, tears streaming down his face as he listened to the most beautiful sound he had ever heard. When the song finally faded, Seraphina looked at him with eyes that sparkled with something he had never seen there before. "Joy, you're going to fly." "Again," he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. "I promise you, Seraphina, you're going to soar." She touched her forehead to his chest once more, and in that touch was a promise in return. Whatever happened next, they would face it together. The healing was far from complete, but the bond between them had become unbreakable. Outside, spring was coming to the world. And inside Hangar 47, 2 unlikely friends continued their work of restoration, knowing that every dissolved crystal, every healed membrane, every freed joint brought them one step closer to the miracle of flight. 6 weeks had passed since Jasper first discovered Seraphina in the forgotten hangar. The space had become their sanctuary, filled with the tools of healing and the warmth of growing friendship. Most of the crystalline prison had been dissolved away. Her wing membranes had been carefully repaired, and the twisted bones had been gently coaxed back into proper alignment. But today felt different. There was an electricity in the air that had nothing to do with the storm clouds gathering outside. Seraphina had been restless all morning, stretching her wings in careful exercises, testing the range of motion that had been slowly returning to her over the past weeks. "You feel it too, don't you?" Jasper asked as he made final adjustments to the pulley system he had rigged to help support her weight during wing exercises. Today might be the day. Seraphina turned her great head toward him, and in her golden eyes he saw something that made his heart race. Determination. After so many weeks of patient healing, she was ready to try. The thought terrified and thrilled him in equal measure. What if something went wrong? What if all their careful work hadn't been enough? But he pushed those fears aside. Seraphina had come too far to let doubt stop her now. The moment of truth as afternoon shadows lengthened across the hangar floor, Seraphina positioned herself in the center of the open space. Jasper had rolled back the heavy doors to their fullest extent, creating as much room as possible. The opening revealed gray skies heavy with rain, but for now the weather held. "Remember what we practiced," Jasper said softly, his voice steady despite the nervous flutter in his chest. "Small movements first. Test everything before you commit. Seraphina nodded, a gesture she had learned from watching him. Slowly, carefully, she extended her left wing. The membrane stretched taut and strong, showing no signs of the tears that had once marred its surface. The crystalline deposits that had locked her joints were gone, dissolved away by weeks of patient work. Her right wing followed, unfolding like a sail catching wind. Jasper held his breath as he watched the wing extend to its full span. It was magnificent, easily 40 feet from tip to tip, and for the first time in years, it moved with fluid grace. "Beautiful," he whispered. "You're absolutely beautiful." She looked back at him, and he could swear she was smiling. Dragons, he had learned, had their own ways of expressing joy. First attempt, Seraphina crouched low, her powerful legs coiled like springs. Her wings beat once, experimentally, creating a downdraft that scattered the papers on Jasper's workbench. The movement was strong and controlled, nothing like the painful, limited motions she had been capable of when he first found her. She beat her wings again, harder this time. Dust swirled around the hangar as the massive wings displaced air with growing confidence. On the third beat, her feet left the ground. It was only for a moment, barely a foot of altitude, but it was flight. Real, honest flight. Seraphina landed with surprising gentleness, her eyes wide with wonder at her own capability. Jasper whooped with joy, unable to contain his excitement. "You did it! You actually did it!" But Seraphina wasn't done. The taste of flight had awakened something deep within her, something that had been dormant too long. She positioned herself again, this time closer to the open doors. Her wings spread wide, catching the wind that gusted in from the storm-darkened sky. Taking wing, this time when she launched herself into the air, there was no hesitation. Her wings caught the wind with the skill of centuries, and she rose smoothly into the gray afternoon. Jasper ran to the doorway, watching in awe as she circled the hangar once, twice, her flight growing stronger and more confident with each pass. She landed on the concrete apron outside the hangar, and for a moment Jasper thought she might be tired. But when she looked back at him, he realized she was waiting for him to join her. "I can't fly with you," he called out, but even as he said it, he was walking toward her. "I'm just a ground-bound human, remember?" Seraphina lowered her great head and gently bumped his shoulder with her snout. Then she did something that took his breath away. She folded one wing and lowered her shoulder, creating a natural mounting point. The invitation was clear and terrifying and absolutely irresistible. Soaring together, Jasper had worked around aircraft his entire adult life, but he had never actually flown in anything smaller than a commercial airliner. The thought of trusting himself to dragon wings and ancient instincts should have terrified him. Instead, as he carefully positioned himself between Seraphine's shoulder blades, he felt only overwhelming trust. Her scales were warm beneath him, and he could feel the powerful muscles bunching as she prepared for takeoff. "I hope you know what you're doing," he murmured, gripping the ridge of scales along her neck. Seraphine's response was a rumble of laughter that he felt more than heard. Then she launched them both into the sky. The sensation was indescribable. Unlike the enclosed, mechanical feel of an airplane, this was raw and immediate and alive. He could feel every shift of wind, every adjustment Seraphina made to their flight path. They rose above the small airport, above the town beyond, into the realm of clouds and endless possibility. Below them, the world spread out like a living map. Jasper saw his workplace from an entirely new perspective, saw the roads he drove every day as thin ribbons connecting clusters of human activity. But mostly he was aware of Seraphina, of her joy in flight, of her gratitude for the freedom they had restored together. A new beginning, they flew for nearly an hour, exploring the sky like children in a new playground. Seraphina was careful always to keep him secure, her flight smooth and controlled despite her obvious excitement. When they finally returned to the hangar, landing as gently as a feather touching down, Jasper felt as though he had been fundamentally changed. As he slid down from her back, Seraphina turned to face him. For a long moment, they simply looked at each other, human and dragon, bound by an experience that neither would ever forget. "So what happens now?" Jasper asked softly. Seraphina's answer came not in words, but in actions. She settled down beside the hangar entrance, folding her wings, but not departing. Her message was clear. She was choosing to stay. Not because she was trapped or injured, but because she wanted to. The storm that had been threatening all day finally arrived, rain drumming against the hangar roof. But inside their sanctuary, Jasper and Seraphina sat together in comfortable silence, watching lightning illuminate the sky. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new adventures, and probably a lot of explaining to do when the outside world discovered their secret. But tonight, in the warmth of their friendship and the glow of their shared triumph, they were content to simply be together. The dragon who had thought she would never fly again had not only taken to the skies, but had found something even more precious than freedom. She had found a true friend willing to help her heal, and in return had given him the gift of flight and the knowledge that some bonds transcend species, circumstance, and all reasonable expectation. Outside the hangar, the storm raged on. Inside, two unlikely companions planned their future flights together, knowing that the best adventures always begin with someone willing to help another spread their wings.